afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. As with many nonprofit organizations in Vermont, the American Red Cross of Northern New England relies on volunteers. April is designated as National Volunteer Month in the U.S. Today we'll talk volunteerism, smoke alarm safety, and disaster relief with the Executive Director in Vermont of the Red Cross of Northern New England. The Red Cross of Northern New England serves New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. And this past fall, Sarah Lemnah was named the Executive Director of the Red Cross chapter in Vermont. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
We're very happy to have you. So first of all, you actually have your own personal relationship with the Red Cross. Can you tell me about that story?
Yeah, definitely. So the Red Cross was the first nonprofit I interact with. I was 13 and my house burned down. Me and my sister had just got home from school. We were doing our homework. And we lived in a duplex, and our neighbor threw a burning tea kettle down the stairwell in between our two apartments. The house was gone in minutes. They always say you have 2 minutes to get out of the house. It seemed less than 2 minutes. I grabbed the photo albums because my mom said if anything ever happened, the only thing she'd miss was the family photo albums. My sister grabbed the dog. We got outside and it was gone.
Wow.
It was the first time I saw my dad cry. It was very traumatic. And the next day there was a knock on my grandmother's apartment door with 2 Red Cross volunteers. I don't know how they found out where we were. And they had little goodie bags of like soap and shampoo and that kind of stuff. But they had like gift cards to a local department store, and I could go and get school clothes and a backpack. And it's kind of the first day of normal, and that has stayed with me. And so when this opportunity came, it was a dream come true to give back.
Yeah, absolutely, and also pay it forward to people who were in the same situation. Yeah, that's an incredible story, and totally understandable why you work there now.
Yeah, home fires are traumatic. I cried for 2 years when I heard a fire truck go by. It's very traumatic when you lose everything and your normal is gone.
Yeah.
And the Red Cross tries to help families get back to a new normal.
Absolutely, and you also worked there after all of that in an internship. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, I was an intern at a local TV station, and in '92, I'm dating myself a little bit, there was a major flood in Montpelier. It seems like it's always Montpelier. And we were down there, and I saw this elderly lady and her little dog on a raft being down the street in this river of water. And at the end of the street, when the water kind of edged, there was a tent, and there was Red Cross volunteers wrapping people with blankets, handing out coffee and donuts and snacks, and just listening to people talk. And we walked up, me and the reporter I was working with, and they offered us coffee, and we're like, no, we're covering the story. And like, we're here for everybody. And it was just really amazing to see a community come together and really be there to support each other. It's an amazing moment, and the Red Cross kind of, does those amazing moments in the worst possible times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being there when somebody's not at their best.
Exactly.
And of course, volunteers are always in short supply, but there's always such a large demand for them. Why should someone volunteer with the Red Cross?
Well, our volunteers are the Red Cross. 90% of our workforce are volunteers, which is amazing. So when you see those people out in the disaster zones taking care of, setting up shelters and checking people into blood drives and going out to a home fire, they're all volunteers. They're people in the community who want to step up and give back. And without them, we would not be able to do what we do. So we rely on our volunteers. They're well trained, they're well-meaning, they're dedicated, they are the mission, and we're truly blessed to have our volunteers.
And we're going to touch on some of the different things that the Red Cross does in a minute, but can you tell me quickly what range of things do you do with your 90% volunteers?
Well, it's so many things. So when you go to a blood drive and someone checks you in, that's a volunteer. And when you're done giving your blood and you're feeling maybe a little tired, they're giving you the orange juice and the water and the goodies and making sure you're okay. Last year we saw tons of floods in Vermont. It was volunteers who were setting up shelters and making sure you have a place to sleep and food to eat. We install over 300 smoke alarms a year in the state of Vermont. That's a volunteer going out into your home and installing a smoke alarm. When you have a home fire, like what happened to me, that was a volunteer knocking on the door. So our volunteers do all of those things and so much more.
So it's not just blood, it's not just disasters, it's a variety of things.
It's everything from teaching disaster preparedness, going out and teaching people how to prepare to minimize the risk. It's making sure your homes are safe and you have smoke alarms. It's being part of the casework team when after the fire, after the flood, connecting them to long-term supports and services, which is great because some of those jobs are remote. So maybe somebody wants to volunteer and they don't have the ability to go out in person and do it, maybe because of, they physically can't go out or there's transportation issues. There's a volunteer position for everyone, and that's what's amazing.
That's incredible. And you actually mentioned the disaster action team volunteers. Can you tell me a little more about what that position entails?
Yeah, those are the ones that get up at 3 in the morning because there's a flood or a fire. They're an amazing group. We always need more. We cover the entire state of Vermont. and to have the amount of volunteers needed to cover, the over 100 home fires every year, just alone. Home fires always tend to happen in the middle of the night. So volunteers is dealing with that. The floods, it takes a lot of volunteers to set up a shelter and food and to work with families to make sure their medications are replaced, to give, mental health services and spiritual support. It's traumatic. And those are all our disaster action team. They are a very educated, hardcore, well-trained group. That's one thing that always impresses me when I joined the Red Cross was the amount of training and education that's available. I mean, literally it looks like a college course book. So these people have an opportunity to really learn a lot of skills, and they use those skills to support their community, and it's an amazing team.
And that training is provided by the Red
Cross? It is provided, and it's free of charge, and it's a great benefit. I always think that when I was in college, I wish I would have known about it. There had been so much experience to help with me professionally and community-wise to learn all these skills. It's an amazing amount of opportunity to learn things, get new skills, and to build a community. That's one volunteer told me that they became a volunteer because they were new to town. They didn't know anybody. They joined the Red Cross, and now they have all these friends and connections. So it's a great way to really build your community and to support your community.
And you touched on this a little bit with being able to serve maybe your specific community somewhat remotely, but can you talk about the travel obligation for somebody in one of these disaster teams?
Yeah, so some people want to serve remotely. They want to help their neighbors, and that's amazing, and they're serving all over Vermont. Some people want to use their skills and help kind of those big disasters we see on the news. We see the wildfires in Maui, we see the hurricanes and the tornadoes. And people who want to do that can take the training, can be on the list, and can be deployed. And you're being sent somewhere. Obviously all expenses paid. You're working with a team. You're getting more skills. You're away for a couple weeks at a time. They are still volunteers in Maui right now. There's still volunteers throughout the United States dealing with natural disasters. It doesn't just end when the news stops covering it. It goes on for months. And our volunteers are on the front line making sure families are supported. In fact, we were still supporting flood victims just, this year in February. We were still giving financial assistance and helping flood victims here in Vermont. But throughout the nation, we have volunteers deployed. Vermonters are flying all over the U.S., supporting other communities to make sure they have the services they need.
And how about encouraging people to volunteer? How does the Red Cross try and get the word out?
We have a great volunteer services team, and they are really good about talking to people about what your interests are, what your skills are, what you want to learn, what you like to do, what gives you joy. It really has to be a win-win opportunity. It has to be something that makes your soul sing. And they find these great opportunities, they train them, they provide mentorship and support. So volunteers never feel alone. And they can go out and they can try new things. We have some volunteers who are doing 3 or 4 different jobs. They are the overachievers. But they do one, they love it, and then they want to change, and they add it on instead of replacing, which is amazing. So our volunteer services is just really wonderful about matching really great opportunities to the right person, giving them the training they need, and working with them. And the thing that's great is that you could be in college, you can be a retiree, you can be anywhere in between. There's something for you. And we're always looking to get new volunteers in because, people move, people change careers, people retire and, become snowbirds. So we're always needing those new volunteers to kind of keep these services going and robust, and it's an amazing opportunity.
Absolutely, and let's talk about something that might be a little bit closer to your original experience with the Red Cross. You guys are installing smoke detectors in the Sound the Alarm event, and that's coming up on May 4th, is that right?
Yeah, May 4th in Washington County. We're hoping to install over 60 smoke alarms in one day. So we have volunteers coming throughout New England. They're going to converge in Washington and really just make sure people are safe. A lot of people in Washington County had their homes destroyed by floods. And, smoke alarms get destroyed. It might not be on top of lists to replace, but a smoke alarm reduces your risk of death by 50% in a fire. And since 7 Americans die every day in a home fire, we really want to make sure that number goes down. And we want to make sure people are protected. So we selected Washington County because there's a high need. And our volunteers are going to go door to door of people who've made an appointment. So we have appointments throughout the county. And, not only install smoke alarms, but also talk to people about the dangers, like what are the biggest causes of home fires, how to prevent it, how to make your home safer, what to do if there is a fire, and make sure you have a plan in place. I think most of us remember in elementary school, the smoke alarm, the smoke fire, the alarm went off and we all watched out in our little line and we practiced. But how many people practice at home what would happen if you had a home fire? And so we want to make sure Washington County is protected and throughout Vermont. That's our big push on May 4th, Washington County. And if people want to register, they can go to redcross.org/endhomefires, NNE, and sign up. But we also do it throughout the state. And so if you live in another area, please also do sign up, and we'll make sure throughout the year we will get around and make sure your home fires safety plan is in place and that your smoke alarm is in place. But it's really important to make sure that all Vermonters are safe. And Washington County on May 4th is going to be ground central for trying to lessen the effects of a home fire. So we're really excited about that.
And it sounds like there's still availability to sign up.
There's still availability, so we are filling up slots quickly, but we would love to have everybody, we want all those slots full. We want to protect as many homes as we can. So please, redcross.org/endhomefires, NNE, so we can make sure we get you on the list and make sure your family's safe.
And you touched on the education component of that a little bit, but can you expand quickly about what that installation entails?
Right. So making sure they're installed in the correct place. You want a smoke alarm on every level of your home. Making sure that people realize, like, if you heat your home by a wood stove, the dangers of that. If you're cooking, how many times you get a phone call, or your dog's barking, or your kid wanders off, or something happens and you walk away just for a minute, and that's all it takes. So just reminding people to be very mindful of what they do in their homes to protect their families, and then also talking to them about what's your plan of escape, because the door may not be the option. You need 2 ways out of every room. Thinking about people that may need extra help. If you have an elderly relative living with you, or a young child, or a pet, what does that entail? And then having a safe place to meet, because people are confused and disoriented during a fire. And oftentimes people will go back in a home thinking somebody's still in there, but they're out. So you want to make sure that you have one place that everybody goes. And so just reminding them those simple things that we know, but in a time of crisis you don't think about. So plan ahead and prepare, practice, so you have that kind of muscle memory to do it.
And we would be remiss if we wrapped up this interview without asking, what's the blood supply like?
So, blood supply goes up and down. Beginning of this year, we had a real shortage, and that happens during the winter. Bad roads, people want to drive, people get sick, they have holidays. But, we're always kind of right on that edge. And if we go below what we need, somebody cannot get a needed blood product. So it's really important that people give blood and give it now. Don't put it off, because there's always a need, especially type O, because they're the universal donor. But, the Red Cross does not just blood, but we also do platelets. So we're not just dealing with trauma patients, we're dealing with cancer treatment and all sorts of things. So there is a constant need for blood. 1 in 7 people who go in the hospital will need blood. And every 2 seconds, someone requires blood. So this is something that's always critically in need. So we really encourage everyone to consider being a blood donor.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And that takes care of our fence for today. My thanks to everyone working behind the scenes here at WCAX to make this possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.